Welcome to today's presentation and our monthly presentation at the Center of Excellence. I'm here with special greetings from the Vice Chancellor of our university, Professor Olufemi Peters, who may be able to join us today depending on schedule. But however, he sends his warm greetings to everyone on this platform. We are happy today to be here again, as usual, to have our presentation, which has become monthly. And today, we are going to have another exciting presentation from a scholar, an erudite scholar from the University of Lagos, a professor eminent. And he has agreed to speak with us today, and I shall be introducing him. But before going on to the introduction, I'll just, as usual, just tell you briefly about our center, which most of you online already knows about. But just in case there are few who don't know about it, we tell you a little bit about our center. Our Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies was established by our immediate past Vice Chancellor. It's a seed fund from TET Fund. And the business of this center is to bridge the gap between humanity and the future. Our mission is to provide sustainable leverage for interdisciplinary research in migration and global studies. And of course, we have our mandates, which include to provide leverage for field-based and solution-driven research, to serve as an agent of national policy for migration studies, to seek grants for academic activities and outreach for sustainability, to publish and sustain peer-reviewed academic journals and monograph series, to collaborate with stakeholders in the field and policy makers, to organize occasional seminars, conferences, and public lectures, which has emanated from these various seminars, webinars, and presentations we've been having. Many scholars giving us insight to more about migration and global studies. So we have a journal called the International Journal for Migration and Global Studies of the National Open University of Nigeria. Staff can feel free to go online and look at our journal. And of course, you can also go there to look at our center website. We have interesting things there for you to look at, and we are to you to suggest and advise us on many more forward. Yes, the link has been placed online by one of us, Blessing Alabi. So you can click on the link, and we are always here trying to do what we know best how to do. We want to now quickly go to the introduction of today's presenter and the presentation for the day. Today, I have before me here, like I said, an erudite scholar, Professor Nduka Eze. Nwambo Eze is a professor of sociology at the University of Lagos. He regarded as a passionate and consummate lecturer. Of course, he earned his bachelor's degree from no other than our special university, the University of Ibadan, way back in 1978. And he now went to get an academic appointment in University of Lagos after he got a graduate assistant appointment and started growing in his academic career until he became a professor in 2017. His resume, his CV is, of course, very detailed and lengthy. He's an erudite scholar. He's a scholar at the State University of New York, Albany, and he is also a visiting scholar at the University of Swaziland, and so many other academic appointments, both nationally and internationally. He's an examiner. He's widely traveled, widely published, and of course, the list is ending. He is very passionate about a stable family institution in Nigeria. I must say this is a very special and a good one to note. And accordingly, he is the social engineer of an NGO, Family Restoration Initiative, by instrumentality of which he actualizes his dream to give back to society through doing all in his admittedly resource-constrained capacity to support ailing unstable, traumatized, or afflicted families and members. Is into this because you have a passion for good family life. And that is, so our presenter is not only an academic, but somebody who cherishes a good family life. So kudos to him for this attribute. He's a devout Christian, and of course, a devout Catholic, and he's married. Yes, though he had a first married wife, was the first wife demised about 13 years, after which he now went in for a second marriage, and to no other than our amiable, pleasant, pretty princess, Professor Iyabode Omolara Onwabeze, our Dean of Faculty of Arts of our enviable university. Oh, thank you, sir, for being one of us. Lecture today, which is titled Dependent Education and the Crisis of African Development. So on this note, sir, Professor Kai Onwabeze, we welcome you to make your presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Director of the Center of Excellence in Migration and Global Studies. Good morning, listeners. Good morning, viewers. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually my pleasure to be making this presentation at the invitation of this center, ably piloted by indefatigable Professor Gloria Aneto as director. Please permit me to eulogize the Vice Chancellor of the National Open University of Nigeria, Professor Olufemi A. Peters. I call him the Chief Shepherd of the National Open University of Nigeria for creating the enabling environment for all of us to interact this morning, paving into the afternoon. Let me also mention even though Iyabode Omolara Onwabeze, because she was the go-between the center for quite a while until I established independent relationship. That was my topic, dependent education and African development crisis. That with dependent education and African development crisis. I am going to divide my presentation into 8 sections. And the first section is a bit omnibus. It has 5 subsections. Introduction is going to have background to the study, statement of the problem, objectives of the study, assumptions driving the study, and then the theoretical anchor of this study. I will start with the background to the study as part of it. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say that the background to this study is set against the background of over 500 years of contact between Europe, America, and Africa. As you know, this started about 1460 to 1470 with the arrival of the Portuguese into the West African over 5 centuries ago. But within those 500 or so odd years, a lot of things happened in the contact between Africa, America, and Europe. Notably, for 350 years, 3.5 centuries, was the inhuman transatlantic slave trade, within which time Africans were converted into items of trade to be bought and sold, of course, not as human beings. Within that same 500 years was another 100 years of colonization for different countries in Africa. Some stayed less than 100 years, some over 100. Nigeria spent 99 years as a colony of Britain, and that's not the end of it. After quote and unquote flag independence in Africa of many of the states, there followed what we called the post-colonial. But that's also interesting. The post-colonial is an aberration. And I will tell you why as we progress. But let me say that this has taken an average of 50 years. From that time, in Nigeria is over 60 now, going to 62 years, post-colonial. What is important about these historical tragedies? The nature of the contact between Africa and the West, characterized by what we call a relationship of unequal exchange and mindless exploitation of Africa by Europe and America. And of course, there are consequences for this inhuman, unequal, and regrettable relation. Consequences are rapid development of Europe and America when such states as the United Kingdom became Great Britain, because they had robust resources coming from Africa, from other parts of the world, to quicken and hasten their development process. And conversely, persistent underdevelopment of consistent exploitation. And somebody has said, from that point of contact, African development, autochthonous development was arrested, and we entered into what we call a period of arrested development. It's been given different names. But most of all of the consequences within this period, I would say, is the introduction of a retrogressive education system into Africa, which was inherited by the various states at the point of independence. That is the background to this study. I go to the statement of problem, and to say that this study wants to understand the extent to which persistent underdevelopment of Africa, let's say 60 years after independence for most of the states, is a consequence of the retrogressive education system introduced by the respective colonial authority. Therefore, the aim of this study is to investigate the connection between retrogressive education and persistent underdevelopment in Africa. There are other objectives of this study, and they include one, to investigate the interconnection between dependent, inherited, and fundamentally unchanged colonial education policy and slow economic growth and low and declining human development indices in the African continent. Two, to investigate the other characteristics of post-colonial Africa, particularly the immediate post-colonial and present, which create an enabling environment for dependent education to thrive, to survive, and then to conduce to reproduction of economic growth without commensurate human development, without commensurate human high poverty index and unsustainable development. That is what people call growth without development. And finally, as the objective, to unbundle dependent education, lay bare its disadvantageous features with the intention to place orthodoxy, that is the education system as we know it today, with Afrocentric education that supports high economic growth rate, and matched with human development indices, sustainable development, and unfettered African mindset. That is, let us unbundle dependent education, and then in its place what we call critical education, Afrocentric education, okay, which will produce a different set of consequences than what we have at the moment. I go to the assumptions that drive this study. Very quickly, the development of post-colonial Africa is slow, unstable, and rather unstable because the education and knowledge system that drives it are programmed to continue the dependence of African states and economies on the colonial authorities and in the overall benefit of the colonizer rather than the respective colonial countries or societies. That's one assumption, that the education system which we run were programmed to deprogram development in Africa and to articulate us inextricably to the West. And as long as that education system succeeds, that objective continues to be produced. Two, to fix the development of post-colonial states requires fixing the education system, and to fix this too, we also need to fix the state. These are very, thought-provoking assumptions that if Africa must develop, if Africa must get out of its quagmire, we must readdress the education system. But at the same time saying, if we must readdress the education system, the duty of drawing education policy and carrying it out is the duty of the state and the functionaries of the state. So we might not be able to what this assumption is saying is that we might not be able to handle a new educational system in Africa without first and foremost dealing with the functionaries of the state. The third assumption, that dependent education cannot give recipients, that is, those of us who have acquired education under these conditions, cannot give us original thinking skills, creativity, critical thinking, and of course, because these are the duties of the colonizer. Metropolitan education prepares the colonizer to perform this function, and it provides for us the only opportunity in the education system just to follow, what I call follow education. That's the third assumption. And the fourth assumption is that the drift of African development into the precipice is a direct correlate of the mistaken belief that Africa is poor, while in fact, Africa is not poor. Africa is potentially rich, but doubly pillaged by the residues of colonial vested interests on the one hand, and what I call, the people I call a vampire, domestic ruling elite on the other. So that Africa's poverty is conditional, is a consequence of two opposing forces, one at home, one abroad. And finally, that is the fifth assumption, that Afrocentric education and knowledge, by being indigenous, creative, and empathic, is intrinsically imbued with the qualities and the characteristics that will usher in the African development renaissance in a relatively shorter time. That assumption leads me to say that it is not all cries, it's not all regret for Africa. There's still a silver lining in the sky. And in the course of this lecture, we are going to unravel the way out for Africa. Now, the methods by which we executing this study, essentially, we relied on qualitative research approaches comprising the following: critical library-based literature survey of secondary repositories, content analysis of selected library sources, historical / comparative analysis of relevant sources, and drawing of inference. And 5, logical and deductive reasoning guided by the research problem and our research objective. Now, I go to the concept of dependent education. Dependent education. What is dependent education? And I say that this is an education system in which the following characteristics occur. 1, the underlying philosophy and policy. 2, institutions, management, schools, examination, certification. 3, curriculum, pedagogy, and expected learning outcomes. We are all masterminded, written up, and brought in by the respective colonizers into their respective colonies, but which did not undergo any significant change towards indigenization after independence. That is to say that in most African states, what you call post-colonial states, by the way, the education system prepared and brought it in by the colonial masters. And let me also mention that Africa is in a more serious respect to our relationship with colonizers. Latin America, for example, had only Portugal and Spain colonizing the whole subcontinent. But Africa had 8 colonizers, so that in Africa, there are 8 areas of influence. And each of these 8 colonizers brought in their respective cultures, respective idiosyncrasies, their respective attitudes, including their respective education systems, and then different ways of incorporating their areas of influence into their own share of the African pie. That is the meaning of dependent education. That is education that was programmed and given to us, and we are running with it. Now, this gives us, this raises one important observation. You see that after independence, quote and unquote, after independence, every colony at independence faces a patriotic obligation to conceptualize, reconceptualize, and indigenize received education. That is, to make received education conducive to their own development, their own thinking, their national goals and aspirations. As we shall say in a short while, because education is everything. Education drives everything. And if you don't change that driving force, that primary force, that game changer, if you don't change it, and you continue to run it the way it was introduced to you by the colonial masters, you will get different results. You will continue to get results that was programmed into this education system by the colonizers. And we have examples of America, China, India, Singapore. They took those momentous opportunities in history to chart their own education course that will lead to the transformation of their societies. Nigeria did not. Ghana did not. South Africa, of course, was impaired more by the apartheid regime. Togo, Morocco, Mozambique, many other African countries did nothing. Now, if you continue to run your imported and dependent education system, we must itemize the intention of the colonizer as embedded in the dependent, produce and reproduce letter writers, speakers of colonial languages, interpreters, stenographers, artisans, repairers, clerks, secretaries, copy typists, word processors, theoretical scientists, supervisors, managers, cashiers, drivers, cleaners, laborers, gatemen, etc. Not drivers of change. 2, dependent education was programmed to legitimize continuation of colonization after independence, to legitimize the continuation of colonization after independence. You may say that this is contradictory. How can there be colonization after independence? But that is one of the contradictions that we find ourselves in Africa. What colonial education does is to legitimize the continuation of colonial structures, colonial organizations, colonial relationships, attitudes, and the dependence of colonized peoples on the colonizer. And see all these things as legitimate, as good and fine, that there's no need for change. You should not bother yourself. 3, the third objective of dependent education, to resist fundamental change in the colony, to encourage cosmetic reforms, and to reproduce dependent mindsets in all the states, in all the countries after independence. And this is why you may begin to understand why we are talking about the continuation of colonization after independence, because that's what the education system was supposed to be doing. 4, to deprioritize production and reproduction of creative ingenuity, creative scientists, practical technologies, people with a craving for original knowledge production, groundbreaking indigenous research. Independent education is not supposed to produce independent thinkers, disobedient thinkers, breakaway thinkers, non-conformist ideologues, unorthodox thinkers, autonomous thinkers, change-oriented thinkers. No. Dependent education does not produce any of these. Now, let me go to the features of dependent education and knowledge. We just mentioned quite a few. That dependent education is supposed to produce dependent knowledge system, of course, in the colony. It's also supposed to enslave the soul and imprison the minds of recipients of received education. That is, colonial education has brought in. 3, to indoctrinate and impart copy knowledge. Sorry, I should have put copy knowledge in quotes. Copy knowledge. Everything copy, nothing original. 4, supposed to legitimize the belief in the colony and at the center that the duty of the center is to think, create, and sell products and services. While in the colony, our duty is to buy, to use those products and services produced in the center. So we don't need to think. We only need to follow. 5, that learning outcome must be devoid of originality, must be bereft of creative ideas, and barren of ingenuity or indigeneity, barren of indigeneity. These are the features or part of the features of dependent education. They also include non-inquisitional, non-critical consciousness in the result of the education that we receive. An education system that does not doubt anything, does not object to anything, it does not query anything, it does not interrogate the status quo. Everything is okay. You can look at it in Nigeria. The more educated you have, the more PhDs you accumulate, the more you resign to fate. People don't ask questions. And unless you ask questions, you can't get results. Nobody will give you answers. Our education system is not questions. Who will disagree with the system? The other feature is that it is received, the education system, it is received, it is alien in origin. Of course, there's no home context ownership. Knowledge is merely domesticated, grafted, but fails to understand and to respond adequately to domestic needs and emergent problems. In fact, it looks like we receive to educate ourselves out of context. The more educated we are, the more estranged we are from our environment. Now, this education system infuses false consciousness and a distorted view of social reality on receiving, to the extent that if you say, for example, that independence in Africa is false consciousness, you hear many people talk about it since independence. Even very educated people say, 60 years after independence, what are we doing? What is Nigeria doing? And I ask, are we independent? Are we actually an independent country? The same thing you talk about democracy. You hear Nigerians every day talking about, since the return of democracy, have we returned to democracy? Are we a democratic country? Or did we just return to civil rule from military rule? Are they the same thing? Substantive democracy, do we have procedural democracy? After 4 years, go and line up, do our votes count? What is democracy? You see, but received education gives you, programs you to continue to beat these concepts as if they are real, as if they mirror our situation here, as if they understand our condition. We also continue to giddy along, making mistakes, falling head over heel, wanting to achieve democracy, wanting to achieve constitutionalism, and all of these things don't exist on reality on ground. Even the definitions that these things have from where they are coming. Democracy doesn't mean the same thing here as in America. It doesn't talk, for example, access to potable water. Isn't democracy not the government of the people, for the people and by the people? Access, inclusiveness, participation. Are these not the elements of democracy? Are we participating in development in Nigeria? Are we participating in our culture? Are we participating in the economy? Are we participating in politics? Do our votes? Education prioritizes foreign ideas, books, journals, teachers, certificates, schools and institutions, experts, research funds, endorsement of local achievements, etc. If you want to become, as you rise in the academia in Nigeria, you must publish in journals that appear, okay? You must be a Google scholar, you must be that. All of that without any relevance to African situation, African problems. That you appear here and there, you appear in 250 places. France is still collecting colonial and taxes from African countries. And you are going to their places to publish, and you are jumping up and you are clapping for yourself, where those instruments are instruments for the advancement of the bondage which you are in. So there's a lot of mental colonization. Independent education also makes us believe that indigenously relevant knowledges like traditional medicine, deity oath taking, indigenous languages, traditional farming techniques, traditional midwifery, herbal drugs, widowhood inheritance, etc., that they are not only discouraged, they are inferior. We don't talk about that. These things are, in a way, gives us a situation in which concepts and terms retain their meaning as in their places of origin in the various metropolitan centers in Europe and America. But these concepts are not contextualized in the colony. Of course, I've been talking about democracy, education, independence, development, constitution, government, citizenship rights, independent national electoral commission, for example, election, political party. What are political parties in Europe and America? What we have in Nigeria, those political parties, are they educating the people? Are they conscientizing? Are they game changers in the positive way? Do they have program for political education and conscientization? Political parties. And then look at what we call Independent National Electoral Commission, for example. We just use terms. Do we have an Independent National Electoral Commission? Why are we deceiving ourselves as a people? You'll be expecting, you set up a program, you give it a bad name, you give it an awkward name, but you expect it to produce a different result. And it starts in contradiction from the day of establishment. Since the day INEC was formed, it has never been independent. Look at the Constitution. Look at the composition of the board of INEC, for example. Look at the appointment of the chairman of INEC. One person. And you say it's independent. So that what dependent education does is to deaden our ability to think as a people. We don't think, we just continue to band around concepts, things that we see around. Continue to believe that we are doing things right. Because Europe and America are clapping for us because we are going deeper and deeper into the abyss. And they know, and they laugh at us. Anytime there's opportunity, they laugh at us as quote unquote this zombie. And the source where we can change our fortune, I used to say our mumu don't do. The day our mumu don't do, we begin to address this matter from the roots. We go back to our education system because that is where our salvation. Dependent education does not create, sing or honor indigenous heroes, achievers, but foreign ones. Go to our different courses. All the names, all the references are abroad, American, Scottish, British, French, German, what have you. We don't cite Nigerians, we don't cite Africans. Dependent education prioritizes the arts, humanities, social sciences over pure science, mathematics, technology, medicine, or engineering. Even when they have these faculties and departments, they are not equipped. They are not correct, in spite of the fact that these are those aspects of our education system that have direct impact in productivity, real productivity. Dependent education alienates recipients from their domestic environment, including disdain for local knowledges. Talk about what we call alternative medicine. Some people call it traditional medicine. Once you ask people, even the way our doctors will respond to you, why should you still be talking about that? These systems, no, not anymore. And then dependent education alienates recipients from their domestic environment. Okay, we have mentioned that. And then puts premium on certificates, degrees and diplomas, rather than on functional life supporting skills. People that display exceptional IQ are seen as fit for training or further training only in metropolitan schools and universities. Once a person gets what we call perfect CGPA anywhere in Nigeria, the next thing is for the person to go to Germany, go to France. It's no more suitable for Nigeria. Must go to UK, must go to Harvard to go and for further studies, because our education system is believed not to deal with very serious Nigerian illustrations of dependent education pitfalls. Although we are talking about the whole of Africa, but let's use our own state, for example, for some. Let's bring it down. Now I'm going to look at 3 policy outcomes. The first are called policy deficit or policy failure. Look at the 6334 education system in our dependent education. The essence was that after the first 6 years of primary school, of course, you know that one has been reduced to 5 years now. Then you go into junior secondary. The junior secondary is supposed to be the end of what you call basic education. That after that point, there is a sifting process, divide and share. And the system will help us through the performance of the pupils. Then we can, those that are qualified to go to the university, we then go to SS1 because they're academic inclined, and then they move on from there. The others will move into different areas. In Nigeria, everybody moved to SS1, admit people into SS1 without asking for JS3 results. I'm not sure they tender it anywhere. They don't ask of it. So that policy has lost its sifting process. Everybody arrives at education, College of Technology, College of Education. Many people who arrive there have no need for university. Well, let us leave that one. Now let us look at CCMAS. The one that everybody is running up and down, CCMAS plus 30, okay? That is the latest credo now in Nigerian university. Ladies and gentlemen, my listeners, CCMAS plus 30 is still business as usual. It has not added anything new. It is not addressing the problems of dependent education. It has done anything. It has encroached on university autonomy and academic freedom. So some very experienced professors, very first-class professors moved to a corner somewhere and then determined that 70% of what should be taught in Nigerian universities, they have the oracle, they know what it is. I understand sometimes that, yes, we need to put some standards so that because of the mushrooming of private universities and what have you, so that some national standards can be made. But 70% is an overreach by all standards. Look at quota admission into Nigerian universities. Look at what you call, the only 45% is admitted by merit. The rest 55%, what you call catchment, that is the immediate environs of the university, and then educationally less developed states, okay? And then you allow people have different qualifications to enter into the same program. And then when they come out, in short, you just mess up the system. Because many people that come out of this system cannot defend the system, cannot even defend themselves, okay? Because you change the goalpost at any point, okay? Now look at the size of our classrooms and the number of students in the classroom. How can there be effective teaching in primary schools, in secondary universities? And then I talked about Western academic endorsement of Nigerian scholars before promotion, the necessity to publish in high impact outlets, majority of which are in Western or Western in origin. The West has got it where it hurts most. We can't think, we can't design anything for ourselves. Even when we want to assess our universities, Western indices. The people stealing our resources, making it impossible for us to breathe. We determine benchmarks, and we are falling head over heel to go and meet those benchmarks, which they make impossible for us. Now, what we call institutional failure. Look at ASU and the federal government. From 1978 to 2022, the ASU federal government debacle. For how many decades of strike, animosity, engagement, disengagement, proscription of university, and what have you. Now look at NUC and the proliferation of universities. The Federal Ministry of Education and legislative to equalize BSc and HND. That is like trying to bring orange and apple and legislate them into similarity. The BSc is a different program altogether. The HND is a different program altogether. The crisis in received education. And then still here you have the concept of tuition-free university education. It's dawning on everybody now that from the day that we've been talking about tuition-free university education, it has been wrong. The people that we are trying to emulate, the people we are trying to equate our universities with, do they have tuition-free education? University education? In Harvard, in Oxford, is education free? University education, is it free? Is university education basic education? In any case, what are we producing? Are we producing people that we compete with graduates from all other parts of the world in what we are doing? And then output failure. Schools, universities, disconnect. Universities and industry disconnect. Skills obtained incongruent with industry, economic needs, obsolete labs, obsolete workshops, no practical skills. All of these are intended in dependent education. And in all these failures, we have helped to advance the cause of the colonizer, independent education. Now, there are empirical implications of institutionalizing dependent education, what I call ex-colonies, supposedly. because we are still colony. Now, you see, what dependent education does is to produce and reproduce change in continuity. That is, the more things seem to change, the more they remain the same. Look at our system. Is anything changing? For example, not minding the following: the number and sophistication of education reform policies. Are our graduates better today than they were before? Length of time since independence, that is to say 60 years after independence, is the same business as you. The education system has been sliding down. Amount spent in the education sector, even if we spend all our money, all our annual budget in education, with the mindset that we have, with the philosophy that guides our education system, spend more money, you won't get better results. Look at the number of schools, colleges, and universities, and the rate of establishment. We are still reproducing the same thing: inadequacies, multiplication of education management institutions, number admitted, graduated, efficiency rating in the system, excellence and brilliance of schools and outputs. All of these things, number and qualification of teachers. The more of these that you have, the more it appears our education system is not responding. It's dead. All our antidotes, the education system is not responding. Now, two cautionary observations. I have always people heard, I think it's Don Williams, the American country musician. He says, it is no use running when you're on the wrong route. So as long as we continue to band around dependent education, whether we run, we set up 200 more universities, we budget 50% of our annual budget in education, we are not likely to break through. The problems that face us, we're not likely to be able to solve. Another cautionary note: you cannot continue to do things the same way and expect different results. These are words, not mine, that are important that we keep in mind. Things we need to do to change our education system. Well, our schools, our education and knowledge, orientation and philosophy, we need to change. What do we need to change? Our philosophy. We need it to be more critical. We need more originality. Teacher training and orientation, particularly pedagogy, should be participatory, emancipatory, and democratic. That is classroom practices. The way we teach our children, the way we teach teacher-student relationship today is like the Lord and the master. It's supposed to be democratic. It's supposed to be participatory. You're supposed to be talking as if we're equals, so that the people you are teaching can loosen up. Be free to ask questions. When you make the classroom caustic, when there's an air of fear in the classroom, but these are receipts from dependent education, and we must change it. School setting, the number of classrooms, we need to increase. Classroom furniture, yes. Other classroom conditions, number of children per classroom, we need to reduce that. Classroom management style, as we have said, should be participatory. We should begin in the classroom to teach, let our children and our recipients begin to develop independence, character, self-confidence, that I can do it by myself, that I'm a creature of God, and from inside me, I can make this change. Curriculum content, we need to spice up, particularly emphasizing practicals, functional skills, and then changers of society should be reflecting in our curriculum. Independent mindset, disobedient thinkers, and futuristic thinkers. Of course, dependent education thinks about yesterday, thinks about colonial times, but critical education thinks about the future, thinks about tomorrow, thinks about solving problems that existed yesterday. It does not mire itself in yesterday. Outputs as change agents. Yes, our educational institutions, the outputs must see themselves as change agents, not just mere partakers, not just system maintainers. They should be people that doubt, that ask questions, that are skeptical, that are critical, that are analytical. Yeah, we must expand the system of funding of education. What we call education partners, all education partners. No more government as godfather, because government has privatized education for so long. I mean, privatized in government, okay? To the extent that when it finally came to privatizing, it is now creating a parallel private sector that are overtaking government schools in several different ways. And there's no harmony in terms of fees paid, in terms of what we expect from these universities, in terms of management styles and systems. Some schools, some universities in Nigeria award degrees in 2 calendar years. Of course, they have an internal system. They have summer schools. When we go on holiday, when the rest of the world goes on holiday, they continue. It's done in the West. All of them are accommodated here. And I hope the NUC is aware of all. There are also universities in this country where a student gets to 400 level. Oh, and he's seen that he's likely to make a third class or a pass. And then he has to go back, repeat final year, so that you can come out at worst in second class or lower. That is sorting. That is working from the answer to the question. There's a lot of crisis in the education system. Now, we also need to emphasize more science and technology education for self-reliance and increased productivity. Let us switch off the mindset of external dependence, external assistance, external dictation, and endorsement, that unless these things happen, we can't make it. Now, elements of African development crisis. The definition of African development crisis is that it describes a situation of continuing capitalist colonization of Africa in which states, that's African states, economy and society in the respective countries are characterized by, among others, unstable, unpredictable, intractable, precarious, intensified difficulty, negative and retrogressive social changes that leave the domestic political elite very rich, the continent and the respective countries poor, the peoples very poor, owing principally to the fact that the domestic ruling elite collude with foreign, particularly American, European, and a few Asian governments and capitalist economic institutions and interests to corruptly enrich individuals, steal, exploit, deplete, cut away, and critical African development resources. That is to say, Africa is not poor. The poverty in Africa is inflicted. It's man-made. It's not natural. Of course, the forces, the agents of this problem are located within. Now, let us look at things that will occur and we say, yes, the African development crisis does not exist again. When we look at African states and we see continuing stability, breakthrough, certainty, creativity, solution, calm, peace, integration, beneficial, success, prosperity, productivity, serendipity, good fortunes, comfort, improvement, progress, inclusiveness, happiness, credit, contentment, relief, cooperation, growth, higher living standards, then we say that Africa is beginning to develop and leaving crisis behind. Signposts of African development crisis. 1, sharp polarization of African states by colonial loyalties, Francophone, Anglophone, Iberian, Portuguese countries, all in Africa. So you have parallel, you have vertical structuring of African countries, each one following its own colonial masters in Europe. And for that reason, a clear disconnection between states, civil society, and citizens in Africa. Internal crisis in form of fragility, loss of autonomy and independence, insovereignty of respective African states, incessant military coups, military rule and militarism. These countries, of course, if you see the map that is there now, you see those countries at the moment, okay, that weak national and regional and continental institutions. Remember the story that Yoweri Museveni, Ugandan president, told a couple of days ago, okay? So the man has told 2 stories recently. One, some Westerners arrived in Uganda. They want to help to exploit Ugandan uranium. And the man asked them, say, why do you want to exploit uranium? The people say because they want to use it for energy as they are looking for alternative energy. And the man said, do you know that in Uganda here, many people don't have a source of energy? We have low per capita energy availability for the citizens. Now they say, well, that yes, we want to exploit and take away and then produce and this and that. And the man said, okay, why not when you come, you say, okay, we have uranium that we want to exploit the uranium, help you to solve your own energy crisis problem, and then we can then look at our own situation. Why must you come here, take the thing away, and leave our people the way you left them? And he said, when he raised that idea, nobody has come back. Those people didn't come back up to today. And then talking about insovereignty among African states, the same man told the story. A couple of months back, 6 African heads of state were supposed to be going to intervene in Libya. Well, of course, all of us know the story of Libya today, how the West chased Muammar Gaddafi to his death and then created a stateless country out of Libya. There are 2 warlords now, 2 of them giving arms supported by Western interests. And then while they are fighting each other and they are giving arms to fight each other, the West is clandestinely mining and carrying oil away from Libyan oil fields. So that war can go on as they like, and they will continue to fuel those wars. So when African countries, 6 of them, African heads of state, say, we want to go and intervene, and then NATO from across, told them not to go, instructed them not to land. They won't give them landing right in Libya. 6 African countries, operating under the aegis of the African Union, cannot take off in an African country and land in another African country. Meanwhile, the crisis in Libya goes on. And then you are talking about sovereignty, you are talking about democracy, you are talking about constitutionalism. What is the West teaching us? As Charlie Boy used to do. So our moon never do in Africa. Other signposts of development crisis, denigration of African traditional science and technology and knowledges, poverty in the midst of plenty, bastardization of democracy in concept and ideals, limited intra-African trade, low proportion or participation in world trade, financial clinging to power, even life presidencies, unchallenged brazen Western interference in Africa, in African state, economy and society, low priority of science, technology, and local research funding, wide and deepening income differences, or income differentials among the populace, scandalous levels of youth unemployment, mostly externally instigated insecurity has been of economic underproductivity, very low per capita energy availability to average African, export of primary commodities versus high import dependence of manufactured. Now I go to explaining dependent education as source of African development crisis. And we're going to look very briefly. One is education determinism, to the effect that everything development is education, from planning, instrumentation, and administration of development, even development study. Everything about development is education. So the education system you have determines the kind of development that you also have. 2, education as double-edged sword. Education can be a sword, can be a shield. For the West, Western education has been a sword, and it has benefited them. But we are not able now to use it as a shield or develop our own critical education system and then use it as a sword. If we can't protect ourselves, let us, at least sometimes they say attack is the best form of defense. We are not able to defend ourselves. We are not even able to attack because we don't have the instruments. We don't have anything in our arsenal. Our education system is still giddy. Education as game changer. That is from pattern maintenance to system transformation. Whatever it is you want education to do, it will do. So long as you imbue that education system with the wherewithal to produce, you want it to deaden your people, it will do so. If you want to produce critically conscious people, your education system will produce it. It may take a while, but it will do so at the end of the day. Breakaway theory. Breakaway theory. from traditional education model to critical education model. We need to break away. And then Western social science as imperialism. I bring this in because if Claude Ake was talking about Western social science as a tool of imperialism in Africa, why are we not using our own social science? Why are we not indigenizing our own social science to use it as a counter to Western social science? Unfortunately, the social science we study today is Western social science.
Western is West.
That is part of the tragedy because of the location of social science in the production of liberation education. Then critical education for change, freedom, and transformation. Here we say we have a lot to learn from the Brazilian social philosopher, education philosopher, Paulo Freire. Now we go to resetting African development minus crisis. That is, resetting development in Africa, there are two approaches. Okay, but the approaches are combined. One, okay, application of the critical education model, which is the model we are suggesting to replace dependent education. And then to strengthen the critical education model, we need also to upscale traditional African knowledge systems. What in some other part of this lecture I have called Afrocentric knowledges that we people. Now, there are two things to fix if we must reset the African development situation. We have to fix the state in Africa, in each country, and then the state in Africa. And two, we have to fix our education system in each country and in the continent. Fixing the state conceptually comprises government and the people. So to start with, we must conscientize. When we talk about the state, of course, it's officials of the state. We must conscientize, radicalize, if I'm allowed to use that word, state actors, the people and civil society to see the state and institutions and officials and the people as change agents. That is the state as a whole, as a change agent. Now, the state, our state no state in Africa is a change agent. In fact, when you see states beginning to want to play change agency, the rest of Africa rises in opposition. Look at what is happening in Nigeria. Some people say, no, we can't continue like this. This thing is not working. Whether you call it, what is the problem about military rule? Do you want the results? What do you mean? As an individual, if military rule provides what I'm hungering for in Africa, so shall it be. Then we need to fix the education system. We need to work on indigenize our knowledge system, set new goals and objectives for ourselves, focus on education for social change, functional skills, dependent mindset, the new pedagogy of freedom, education outcome, produce change agents. Institutions should be flexible, adaptable, change facilitating, and we change administrative principles. And then things to learn to create. We must reflect on the nature of the continent or the country as we are today. And then think of change. Go, stop, go. That's our education system. We must develop a continental vision. What do we want to achieve? What kind of country do we want? And then transform our society to meet such expectations. Now, there are features of dependent education. We have mentioned quite a lot of them. So I go to my concluding remarks. And the concluding remarks are as follows. We must recognize that there are false assumptions behind African development crisis. For example, there is the illusion that there is independence. Africa is independent. I'm sure after this lecture, we must begin to recognize that we are not yet, we are a more serious form of dependence, of colonization. And then there's also this illusion that Africa cannot make it unless the West, or if the West does not lead the way, we can't survive, we can't make it. We need to change that mindset. Then two sources of development crisis: the anti-people domestic political leaders And then the people we regard as vampires from abroad. So as we change the state and we change the education system, we must have our minds about the enemy within, the enemy without. So that, one, we must stop anti-intellectualism in government. We must also recognize the inevitability of African knowledge. It is capable. We must indigenize our education system. We must begin to think about our own achievements as a people and how can we, other parts of the world, particularly Asia, they are upscaling. China has gone back to Confucius. We have things from behind, even that are working today, by which we can enrich the critical education system that we want to replace dependent education. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, our presenter. I'm sorry, thank you so much.
Okay.
I must appreciate you for this wonderful presentation. Of course, I didn't expect less, and I must say I'm very thrilled by the presentation, and I have learned a lot, and I'm really very grateful to you. I'm sure everyone here will have one or two things to say about this presentation. I enjoyed hearing your salient questions. That are we a democratic nation?
Yes.
Do our votes count? I enjoyed that question, and I'm so sure somebody will help us answer. Are we truly independent? Is INEC truly independent? And then, of course, talking about giving education that has its focus on functional life supportive skill. That really touched me in a special way, because I know that that is what we should all try to achieve. And we're all trying to achieve, especially my own university, the National Open University of Nigeria. We want to achieve that functional life supportive skill as the form of education we are going to, or we're trying to give our learners. And of course, I agree that we have many more things to change. You're talking about independent education, deadening our conscience. So I said yes. So I am very, very grateful, and I will not want to take much time to be bringing out the points you have raised, but to allow others to contribute. Awa had her hand up, so Dr. Awa will come, followed by Professor Okagbare, then followed by Dr. Mina. I think I can see those three for now. Let's take those in that order. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I continue?
Yes, please.
Yes, that's order. You,
Okay.
Professor Okagbare, then Dr.
Thank
Mina.
you. Thank you very much, Professor Mwabweze. And I don't want to take too much time giving you accolades. You don't need my accolades, okay? You have the big cases, so, and we have very little time, so I'll just go into rather my concerns, I would say. Okay, so I don't take it wrongly. I'm saying it was fantastic, and although I was looking for, you know, just so you get my point, so that I make it very brief.
Okay.
My main concern is about, you know, I agree with most of the things you said. Let me start from there. I agree with most of the, how do you say, diagnosis of the problem, description of the problem, even some of the ways out of the problem. So I don't disagree in that way.
Okay.
But at the same time, as a historian, and not just about your paper, but generally how Nigerian historians or non-historians who try to recall the past, sometimes I think need a more critical honesty, let me put it this way, about the role we played. And by that, I mean Nigerians, the role we played in where we are. And I'm saying this because you started actually from the 15th century and onwards.
Yeah.
And based on what I know about the conduct of Nigerian leaders from that time up to the present. So I don't want to make that difference between, you know, our contemporary leaders, politicians are selling out to the West or something. My point is we have always sold out from the beginning. And so if you don't diagnose that problem, the fact that we are the problem, that Everybody pursues, the West pursues its interests. The Europeans would have, they're following their interests. You can't blame them for that. My problem is, what have we done before and what are we doing now? Not just on education, but like you said, on governance, on corruption, on all the kinds of problems really that keeps the African continent down. So that it is important for me, when you talk about the Atlantic slave trade, I think that's what you meant, that you also acknowledge and deconstruct the role of African leaders in that trade. Whether it is out of ignorance or not, that role needs to be acknowledged. But also to acknowledge, I agree with you, that it is the Atlantic slave trade contributed directly in the development of the West because of the movement and people, I'm saying, into that production system. I'm just saying I need the honesty there that says, well, actually, this is what we did back in the 16th, 17th century, and we are doing the same today. Only the technology is different today. The educational system is different today, but we are not doing anything different. I mean, in terms of the choices that our leaders make, they are making the same mistake. I don't know, choices. It's not actually a mistake. They are making a choice. They are making a choice for individual interest and class interest over and above the interests of the majority of the people that occupy what is Nigeria or what is Africa. So that's the main thing really I want to point out. And I think it's very important to have this historical honesty of the past as well as the present. Thank you.
Professor Okagbare, over to you, sir.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Professor Nwabweze for his enlightenment and the exposition of some of our problems. Now, I really enjoyed this lecture, but I just want to say that our major problem really is not our educational system. I don't believe that our educational system is our problem. Yes, it may not be at its best, but I know that our major problem is a recession in social standards and public morality. That is our problem. Because some of these systems which we run are running well in other countries and they are doing well because those who are managing them are doing the right thing. A situation where there seems to be no policy working in Nigeria. It's not our educational system. That our industries have failed. It's not our educational system. That we are not, today we are talking about Naira devaluation and all that. It's not our educational system. We can't make our refineries work. It's not our educational system. People are just greedy and selfish. And so everybody is thinking of money, how to grab money, how to, look at China and other places we are talking about. People who developed China, the leaders were sincere. And they were out to give their best to develop their own nation. But what do we find here? If you have money, we carry it and go and drop it in Europe and then blame the white man for keeping it or not sending the money back to us. Were they the ones who came here to take it and took it over there? The answer is no. We don't have respect for intellectuals in this country. Is it the white man who taught us that? The answer is no. And then today you find out that the same people who will tell you that your educational system is not good enough are coming here to take away our doctors, our nurses, which were trained under this same educational system. So I think we need to tell our leaders, our people, the truth, that we are the problems to ourselves. And I agree with you to that, because towards your conclusion, you alluded to that. We need to tell ourselves the truth that we are the problems to our own problem. This leadership question, we need to address it. And until we address it, there is nothing we can do about it. Now, I just want to ask a question, because you did mention that we have an educational system, maybe in the past, that possibly we need to return to, and not this dependent educational system that we currently operate. And then my question is, what is that system that we need to return to? I will need some education on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your comments and questions. Okay, thank you. So now, Dr. Willie.
Yeah, thank you
Over
very
to you.
much. Prof, thank you for giving us a sociological look into how Africa educational system has impacted us. In fact, I'm so happy hearing from you and looking at it from that perspective. It gives me so much joy that the sociologists can actually diagnose the problems we have in our society effectively, particularly the social diagnosis that you have given. But I'm very concerned about some of the issues that have been raised, particularly externalizing our problems to the issues of our underdevelopment in Africa. I'm worried about that because over time, if we look at Walter Rodney's, philosophy, particularly in decolonization, I think Africa, have actually refused to decolonize because just like Professor Kabare actually mentioned, crisis or the leadership problem of Africa is the bane of our suffering today. And then he talked about education. Education is not our problem. I think, okay, if education were to be our problem, why are they headhunting our people, the best of the brains that actually went through this same process? I think the issue is, do we need to have a rethink on the kind of educational system that we apply, particularly in teaching methods? Do we need to indigenize our system? Nigeria has about 520 indigenous languages. Should we see this as a problem? The adoption of English language as our official language, is it a problem or a cause? So I think maybe we need to redefine some of these methods so that some of the issues that are being raised can be institutionalized. And I also want to think that we have stronger men, at the helms of affairs than stronger institutions. So maybe, to an extent, the institutions need to be strengthened so that some of these issues can be addressed. Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you very much. Okay, I can see Dr. Gweje's hand up. Over to you, Dr. Gweje, please.
Thank you, Director. I'll start by commending Professor Mabweze for this presentation, very thought-provoking. At first, I didn't want to speak, but having listened to my colleagues, I have also my position regarding some of the submissions they are making. I differ from some of their submissions because from this presentation, it was made clear the place of education in driving development. In fact, we could see that education is the foundation for development in any society. And what he actually has done is to expose how dependent education has been the bane of our development in the area of our mindset. If we get it wrong in our mind, actually there is nothing you can get right. What the colonial masters have succeeded in doing is that they've captured our mind. And what instrument have they used and they are still using is what the professor has successfully presented to us. And that is what is canvassing until we look at this foundational structural problem and address it, we may not attain the required development that we aspire to. Education is key to development, and the center where all this thing takes place is our mind. And that is what these colonial masters, they've been playing. Why our leaders not doing the right thing is the problem of our mindset. Why are we not critically thinking as a society? Why are we not holding our leaders accountable? Why are we not questioning anything? It's the problem of our mindset. And that is what he has succeeded in bringing to fore. And I think we should be looking at how do we address this problem. And I think just opposite of dependent is having an independent, critical educational system. And that is what we should be looking at. I believe that the presentation is up. It is timely. And I'm quite worried about the number of people that participated. And I recommend that the director should share this link widely so that people will be educated Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gbeje. I seem to also be in your school of thought. I agree perfectly that this has been very expository. In this presentation, I have been very much educated, and I agree that looking at education from the perspective the author looked at it is very educating. It's on its own. And I seem to also take the stance that you are taking. However, I can see Professor Tijani's hand up. Over to you, sir, for your comments.
Thank you very much. Good morning from my neck of the wood. And I just want to commend the presenter and also join Professor Awa Mahdi, not because I'm a historian, but also the historical context must always be apt. The presenter may want to look into that. However, I have a major concern, which is the decoloniality of our education system that has been well presented. What exactly is the solution? How do we start? I would have loved for the presenter or anyone of us at this level to proudly present in the indigenous language. We're advocating for indigenous pathway, that we have all that it takes. Perhaps if Professor Nwabuse presented and gave us a caveat and said, well, I will be speaking in Igbo, and all the solution I have for you will be in Igbo. Looking at the indigenous, oh, we have it. I remember as a staff, and I continue to work with our distinguished Professor Okebukola. He will always be so annoyed when you choose not to, cite Nwabuse, Edafe, Okagbari, Ide, and all these people, Emina, what have you, and you start citing Ridley and Johnson and Papa, it will tell you I'm one person that has written about this subject. So my own thing is that when we advocate, I see it as an advocacy, but what exactly is the situation? Where do we go from here to really actualize within the context of the emerging scholarship in or on indigenous education and knowledge sharing? I wish I could, I can speak this in Yoruba or the Lagos Yoruba that I'm so familiar with, but unfortunately I've been colonized, but my mind is not colonized. And by the way, we are educated. You see, when we keep saying we are not educated, they call some people ignorant. It is Western education. We need to always be very clear about that. My great grandpas that engaged in slavery, that saw some of the people, unfortunately, through the Lagos and Badagry axis into slavery, were educated. But they did it based on their time. And as Professor Awa mentioned, we have to blame them too. And guess what? The slaver, those who purchase the slaves, they're not just looking for people, ordinary people. They look for people with skills. That is why those that can replicate the iron bending, iron metallurgy, were sought after from the Igbo region, from the interior of Africa. So they just don't look for people that can, plant rice. So these people have knowledge. Call it indigenous, call it local, whatever it is, we should, stay away from the Eurocentric perspective. But I thank you for opening up our minds until we start giving these lectures in our indigenous languages, and then we now revolutionize. I think not our time, this will come to fruition. That is the solution that we so much look for. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution. I will allow the presenter to respond to the comments and answer the questions. I just want to quickly ask Professor Tijani, If Professor Nwabweze spoke in Igbo today, I'm sure you wouldn't have been able to respond the way you are responding now and having your minds and thoughts out. And I also want to quickly remind you that in Nigeria, we've been rightly informed that we have 525 languages here. And when you are saying indigenous, I'm sure you are referring to Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. So the remaining millions of people
we have to look for solution. Remember, I said it will put a caveat. Oh, I understand English, but I'll be speaking to you in ethnic language. And then we now have a translation underneath. So until we start doing that, even when we go overseas, until we start doing that, okay, you can imagine Chinese and Japanese, they will speak, even the French, and then you have the translation, those who are colonized by French. So what I'm saying is that we will still understand, but it will take us some years, but we have to start from somewhere as we advocate.
Okay, thank you so much. I think for now, we may allow Prof to respond to some of these concerns, comments, and then maybe more will be generated. Over to you, Prof. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let me start from the second to the last. That's Dr. Ugbeji. A lot of the comments that are coming are already also some of the concerns are already mentioned in the paper. And I also know that there is no way you can sit down and take in all perspectives in one paper. There's no doubting the fact that our people played a role. Now coming from Professor Awamadi, our people played a role in bringing us to where we are, no doubt about that. Nobody denied it. And that is why close to the end, I was talking about the enemies without and the enemies within. We are not unmindful of that. We want to, if we rub that out, we'll get a true picture. But when you say that our major problem is recession in social standards and morality, when you say that we are our own problem, what is the system we need to return to? I think by the time this paper is fully produced, some of these things, some of these issues were already answered. You see, when you say our problem is our leaders, our problem is lack of morality, our problem is lack of concern for the citizens, our problem is leadership, that we have built strong institutions and we have built strong individuals, weak institutions. All these emanate from our education and knowledge base. Our education and knowledge base. If you want to change any of these things, you must domesticate this. You must give democracy its true definition as it pertains to us. You must give constitutionalism its meaning in our context, so that you can have an independent National Electoral Commission that is not an independent body. But you continue to run as if it is true. So that the pride of our leaders, corruption, carrying money abroad and everything, we need a reconstruction of our minds. Education is the way out. Education is the way out. You may say that the people here today, maybe what we need is to punish, set a few examples, like Malaysia will always say they did. Punish some very few bigwigs, and corruption will nosedive. Of course, you know that in our own system here, our own legal system even protects criminals. I'm sure you know. Our legal system protects criminals. Many things need to change, and it's education. It's education. The political class in Nigeria does not punish one another. They don't. They don't. Whether you belong to APC, PDP, NRC, or NCNC, they don't punish one another. It's education. We need to change our education system, our concept of morality, our concept of public morality. These things have to change. And then that you say, okay, if you think I have wronged you, or if you think something has wrong, go to court. Justice is for sale. So how will you change our leaders? They have corrupted themselves and the system. If you say this generation is wasted, as we are looking to the coming generation, let us catch them young. And we have already talked about how do we go about these things. I say two things we must address. We must fix the state. And in that case, we are talking about state officials, state institutions, including the Constitution itself. A lot has to be fixed. Governors, presidents, ministers have a free hand on their till on public purse. It doesn't happen in other climes. We need to change because no governor, no person will steal money alone. They change. But if there is morality and people know, no, what you're asking us to do is wrong. It's against public policy. If there are people in the system who will speak out, who know, we need a reconstruction of morality. It's education. And that's the bottom point. There is no way you can do all of these things and get to the bottom. If you actually want to ingrain, institutionalize these new ways of life, these new moralities, is the Constitution. If you hear in Africa that some people are saying, let us go to Niger and fight, you see, we are taking our people so much for granted. Apart from the crisis that is on in Nigeria, if you strike a war in Niger, every person in Niger that has no way to protect himself, they will shift down to northern Nigeria. Are we thinking about the refugee crisis that will emerge? If we strike an imbalance in Niger, Nigeria will bear them. They won't go to Chad because there's hunger there already. They won't go to other places, and they will shift in their numbers into Nigeria. Is science part of our decision making? So that when you see our leaders, they take action before they think. It's an error in our education system because our education is divested from our government and governance, divested from science, knowledge, thinking, and excellence. You don't need superior argument in government in Nigeria. Once you're in power, whatever you think, do. When they find out that it is wrong, then you begin to run it scatter. You see people who are in image laundry begin to run up and down, abuse people, do all that. But it doesn't make what is wrong right. There is a lot that our education system has to do. If you ask, where do we start? We are starting from re-educating ourselves. Re-educating ourselves. You may say it's a long-term position, but even in that long term, when it starts bearing fruit, we'll be happy for it. Where people know if you steal public, if you are on a course to steal public funds, so many people will withdraw immediately because this is wrong. How else will you instill these moralities into people apart from education? Our development process, our development trajectories are determined by the knowledge that we have inside us. Whether we are going to counter external attacks, whether we are going to develop indigenous responses, we must re-educate ourselves. Inwardly, we must prepare ourselves. We must recreate ourselves mentally. Our mindset must change. Education is the beginning. Maybe there are other ways I can talk about it. Maybe not just education taught in the classroom, informal education, even what we teach in the kindergarten and all that. Today, if a teacher punishes a student in the school, the parents will come and fight the teacher. From who? Where did we get all this? Where did we get all? And if we must retract, it's not just for development. It is for our life as a whole. We need to recalibrate our minds. We need to change. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. I want to believe that maybe your response answered everyone's question.
We can't answer all the questions in one day, otherwise we have no business tomorrow. So let's do what we can.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I like that because it means our presenter is always ready to come back when we
Yes,
are
yes,
ready for him.
Oh,
He's
sure.
ready for us. That's this. He's assuring us that he will always come back, and we may have this kind of discussion on a round table conference kind of thing. So please be prepared. We'll soon call on you for
Yes, as long as
a thorough discussion of topics like this. You know,
as long
in the
as
nearest
myself,
yeah, we
yes.
really had a nice time. I can see any hand up again. Looks like okay, that's a clap from Dr. Ernest Ubeje. Yes, I can see
Okay.
that's a clap. I think we've
Okay.
had a real fulfilling day. Even when that day we get to see the video, we are putting it on our YouTube and all the other social media. And I want to really tender Professor Abdallah's apology because he actually sent me a message that he was engaged throughout this week. That's why he wasn't on this platform.
Just to thank Professor Nwabweze, the director had earlier thanked you.
That's
but
right.
Since it's a closing remark, I want to thank you for the presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us. We thank other members of the community, and we look forward to having Professor Nwabweze back again anytime we call on him. Professor Tijani, we thank you for always joining, because I know that this is not a very good time, but you have always made it a point of duty to join us, no matter how bad the weather is. So thank you so much. And we thank other members around the globe that have joined us. And we look forward to seeing you people again. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
Bye-bye.
Nwabweze.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Kagbare, for standing in for the center. Thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you, and we let you know we're going to be on again. Thank you, Prof. Professor Nwabweze. We really appreciate you. Thank you, and have a nice day.